Yep. Hi there, and welcome to the very first Space Ape Varsity Masterclass. Hello to everybody here at the University of Greenwich. Awesome, and hello to everybody watching as well. So you're probably wondering, what is Space Ape Varsity? What is a masterclass? Basically, Space Ape Varsity is something that we kicked off to house all the projects that we're going to basically launch in the collegiate space. And we really feel that, education and gaming, there's a great cross-section there, and we want to support you guys in the future. You're going to be the future leaders of our industry, basically. And so we wanted to give you a space where we can support you, where you can learn something about the careers that you might be going into as well. So we set up these master classes. This is basically our first initiative under the Space Ape Varsity umbrella. And master classes are going to be held every Monday and Tuesday for the next 3 weeks, so until March 20th. On Mondays, we'll be right here at the University of Greenwich. Give your university a little shout out. And then on Tuesdays, we'll be at UCL, which is the University College London. Now, the classes are open to everybody, so it doesn't mean you have to be part of the university to attend the lectures. And of course, you guys watching as well, you don't have to be part of the university, just, turn up, watch. And after Tom's lecture, today you're going to hear from Tom Mejias. He is a client engineer, or creative engineer, as we like to say, at Space Ape, and he's going to give you a lecture on Creative Engineering 101. So he's going to give you math hacks and some things about prototyping. It's going to be good stuff. And after his lecture, we're going to have a bit of a Q&A as well, both for you guys here that are present and also for you guys watching. So we have some mods sitting in the chat. We've got Andy, Liz, and Hagen, I think, in the chat right now, the mods. And they'll be taking your questions throughout the stream. So if you have them for Tom, make sure you throw them in, and then we'll pick a few questions at the end to give to Tom. So if you could also maybe hold your questions until the end, because we'll have a designated time for that. We have a couple of t-shirts to give away as well, so you can sport them like I do. It's exciting times. But yeah, first of all, I'll give it over to Tom, and he's going to educate you guys. So here we go.
Hello there, thank you very much. Thanks for coming along. Yeah, I'm Tom Mejias. I'm going to talk about creative engineering, which is the focus that I've got in the industry. But first I'm just going to talk a little bit about myself and then about the company that I work for, and then I'll go on to the rest of the slides. So I'm Tom Mejias, as it says. I'm a creative engineer at Space Ape Games. I'm about 10 years into the industry now, so graduated in 2008 from Huddersfield University, and I've had experience both in console and in mobile. The last few years have been in mobile, before then it was in console. My specialization was gameplay to start with, and then I moved into kind of UX and creative and gameplay and as a whole. And I'm a huge Blizzard fanboy. Like, if they have something that I could buy, I go and buy it. Like, it's a problem. So who is Space Ape? Well, we're 6 years old as a company. We're mobile focused. We have 4 games released already. One of them, Samurai Siege, the first one we started with. Then we went to Rival Kingdoms, and then Transformers Earth Wars. These 3 are build and battle games. And then recently we released Fastlane, which is like a top-down car shooting game. It's pretty cool, you should check it out. And we've got lots of new games and genres in the pipeline that we're super excited to show everyone. But I'm going to talk about our pipeline later on. And we were recently acquired by Supercell, the creators of Clash of Clans, and they see a lot of good stuff in us and the way we run things, so we're excited about that as well. So what are you going to learn today? You're going to learn a little bit about engineering roles and the industry as a whole, about creative engineering and how you could get into it, about how to do creative engineering, what to keep in mind while you're doing creative engineering, what to make, and what you should learn after you leave this, and then go ahead and try and research on your own if you're interested. So, engineering and industry overview. So in the industry, once you leave university and go into the industry and you spend a few years there, you'll start wanting to get a bit of a specialization and go deeper into some subjects. And there's quite a number of these different specializations that you can go into. You could go into gameplay or graphics, like Michael here at the front. Tools, networking, AI, these are all really vast oceans of depth that you can go into. But you can also be a generalist and kind of dip your toe into a few of these things, be a bit shallow in them, but have a broader kind of outlook over the whole industry. And this means you can work on a few areas at once. Now, these 2 roles are useful in various parts of the industry. So in console and AAA, they kind of want specialists more because the teams are so much larger that they need specific roles to go. So you might have a whole team just on rendering and a whole team on AI and a whole team on networking and so on and so forth. So it's really important for those, that industry to be very specialist focused. Because they're large teams, they're slightly less agile and they don't react quite as quickly to things happening in the industry. So a game takes 3 or 4 years to make, and it's quite a slow boat to turn, if you will. There's a slightly more crunch in my experience, but that could be like mileage may vary. So crunch is where you work late and 12 days a week and all the rest of that. So you're kind of a smaller cog in a big machine because there's just such larger teams. So that's one thing. But you are more secure, so you've got less chance that you're going to suddenly end up on the street. In mobile and startups, it's kind of a little bit the opposite. It's kind of, they're looking for generalists because there's such smaller teams, like you're talking about 3 or 4 people on the team, that they have to be able to do many things at once, so it's really important. Because it's smaller teams, it's a really agile boat to turn. You can just go, oh, that company's done this thing, I better pivot what I'm doing and do something else. So it's really important that we're able to do that. In my experience, less crunch, but again, that depends on the company. And because of the smaller teams, more personal impact. Yeah, so I'm pressing the wrong button. Here we go. No. There we go. So what is creative engineering? It's kind of my focus. So I do gameplay engineering, creative engineering. These are all different like names that of like the topics under my umbrella that I look at: prototyping and concept validation. So when I was going to do this talk, I kind of sat down and did a whole mind map of everything that I wanted to talk to you about. And it's really spooky to look at, so I'm going to kind of show you a second of it, and then don't worry if it freaks you out, because then I'll move on to the next slide. Oh, there's so much stuff. Anyway, so this is a bunch of stuff, and it'll be, all these slides will be available on the blog afterwards, and you can always rewatch them. So don't worry about trying to read all this right now. I'm going to go over like 2 or 3 of the topics in a bit more in depth, and then see how we go from there. So the high-level overview of creative engineering is, and I've tried to internalize it into a mantra because I like doing things into like a sentence or like a statement of intent so that I can communicate it quite nicely to other people. So mine is: write good, extendable code fast for the express purpose of validating a hypothesis. Well, that's a mouthful, and now I say it out loud. So cutting that up into the first bit and the second bit. The first bit: write good, extendable code fast. That means being efficient with time, not writing the same thing over and over all the way through your code base, or getting like such an entangled loop of code spaghetti that you're like, oh God, how do I go from here, and all the rest of that. And the way to go around that is to think ahead. And for the second part, validating the hypothesis, you want to be focusing on the user experience, how the players and how they play your game. And you do that by feedback mechanisms and the quality of play, and focusing on answering that hypothesis. So how do we do that? Number one is write good code, and it seems like a bit of a counterintuitive thing. A lot of you probably think that writing prototype code means like throwing the thing away and it's rubbish code and that's okay. What I found is that it doesn't really mean that. I found that if I stop and spend 5 or 10 minutes before I even write anything and think about how I'm going to do it and how can I make it extendable, it actually helps me in the long run as I'm trying to avoid getting into those spaghetti loops. It depends really how long you're going to be in that prototyping phase for, but I'll get to that. So I find that if I refactor often and obsessively, so refactoring, if you know, is going back and changing your code to make it nicer and fit more systems and more readable and all the rest of that. Going and scavenging code from previous prototypes or things on open source and refactoring it. Just don't write things if you don't have to. Your designers and you are going to change your mind every 2 minutes, so make your code extendable. I'm saying the same thing. And don't get caught over optimizing. So don't get caught up trying to make things super performant right at the beginning, because it's not going to help you. That's something that you do in production. At the beginning, you're just going to be trying to get to the means to an end, kind of like, how do I get to that end goal in a efficient and extendable way. The biggest piece of advice I have around doing this is make yourself a toolkit. Don't try and make a whole game at once. If you're trying to, like, you've just opened up Unity or you've just opened up Unreal and you're like, God, I don't know what to make. Instead, you could start making little systems. Like every game has a health system or a damage system or an ability system. Just try making those generic systems. Keep them all separate or dependencies on each other. And then you just drag them into your prototype as you need them. And that'll help you just building blocks. Search that I only found out about last week, but it's like super cool. You can type anything you want in there and get a 3D model of it. And for UX, just try opening like mobile games or console games. If you really like the way a menu system works in Call of Duty or in Clash of Clans, just open it up. Try and replicate that in your game. See how far you can get with it. It's a super interesting way to approach it. Yeah, so I like to really start planning my features before I even start writing them, which sounds obvious. But I follow out the what, where, who, how, all that kind of stuff. So what is the feature you're about to make? Have that planned, have an understanding of what it is you're trying to make. And then ask yourself, why am I making this feature? And how does it tie into my overall vision? Are you making this feature for you because it's fun to write? Or are you making this feature because it's going to be good for your end user? That's a question you should ask yourself. How are you going to build this? So you're going to think about the way you're going to structure this, how you can make it extendable, if you can merge it in with any other systems. Where are you going to put this in your big code base to avoid spaghetti? And then now you know where, go back to how, and you're going to end up in this loop of how, where, and how, and where until you kind of figure out where it should go. And then now you decide when. When are you going to actually do this bit of code? And so once you've done all these steps, you just repeat them until you're happy. And finally for this section, designing for your players. So have a good idea what you want your players to feel. Be really empathetic. Like your players probably aren't going to be you. So you've got to put yourself in the mindset of your player base. Go ask people who may be your player base. Go figure that out because it's super important. And then have a plan to how to elicit that feeling from them. As I mentioned earlier, ask yourself the question, is this system here because it's fun for me to write, or is it here because it just belongs in the game? And from the UX point of view, you should show, not tell the player. So if you have a tutorial, rather than putting a big dialogue with like lots of text in it, show them. Put little pointers and stuff and guide them around the game as you can. And keep it simple, stupid is the ever-present axiom. So summary of that, refactor early and often. Make yourself a toolkit, be a scavenger, have a plan, design for your players. I think that's for that section. So as you're making these things, what should you keep in mind? You should think about your scope. So often you'll get to this point where you've got like so many things you could make and you're not sure what you should make first. And to get around that, you should spend 5, 10 minutes, 20 minutes with you and your designer, or just you and your team or whatever, and collate a massive list of all of the abilities and interactions that are relevant to that feature that you're working on. You think, okay, I want to make this cool ability system where you can shoot fireballs, and you go, okay, you and your buddy sit down there and like, okay, what could this fireball do? And you just list out a metric ton of ideas, and you get them to list them out and everything around it. And then you slice through those ideas once you've written them down into some common systems. And then you prioritize those systems by how many of the original features they unlock while you're doing that. And then you do those. So by ordering them in this ranked list of most systems you unlock to the least system, you can get really a lot more bang for your buck out of that. And it makes it more extendable. Then there's thinking about where you are in the project lifecycle. So you probably have done game jams. You've probably spent a bit of time prototyping stuff, but you probably haven't gone into production yet. But each of these 3 phases has really distinct ways you approach your code, approach your design. So in the game jam, you kind of want to be focusing on the interaction and like shamming the rest as much as you can. So you make some fake UI systems, like don't bother trying to make a whole crafting system unless the game is about crafting. If it's about jumping fish, make the jumping fish and then make everything else look fake, and that's the idea for that. For prototyping, it's really important to have some of those peripheral features in there so that you're able, because you're going to spend at least a month on the prototyping, so you want to be really able to iterate on there and not be caught without extendable code. So this is where you want to spend the majority of your time. In production, you're basically, you know what you're making. So at this point, you're just stripping out all the extendability again and making it single purpose, making it perform and make it run on every device that you can. And it's, yeah, that's that. So at Space Ape, we do something to keep that kind of a bit more regimented. We've got this funnel idea where we've got this, the top of the funnel is like hundreds of ideas getting filtered into there from game jams, from people having ideas, from chat in the kitchen. And they go into the top of this funnel into kind of a game jam prototyping phase. And at this stage, we can spin up teams on our own and spend a couple of months, 3 months working on these prototypes. And at every phase, we're like, oh, should we kill this? Should we carry on going? And we're going backwards and forwards. Once we've got through that prototyping phase and we're kind of confident in what we're making, we go into a proof of concept phase, which is kind of like a pre-production phase on where we spend most of the time answering those questions that we're not sure about, the unknowns, and finding out all of that stuff. And so at that point, we're making the code quite extendable. And then at the bottom, we go into the agile production where we're just like, test it. Can we get it out onto the App Store and validate that these ideas, get some numbers, get some retention stats. So we use this kind of system, and at any point, lots of games are falling out the side. Teams are kind of going like, oh, I don't like this. I'm going to go and merge in with another team and do that game instead. So it's an important kind of thing that we developed over the last couple of years to really regiment this process, and that we know where we are in the process. Also, it's important to think about where you are, and so thinking about the audience that you're actually targeting with these prototypes, because generally speaking, at the beginning, you'll just be showing your team or your fellow students and all your friends. And at that point, you probably don't need to be worrying about usability and whether they know where the back button is or how to get out of the game, because you can tell them because you're right there. But when you've got a wider group of people, your whole lecture group or your whole company or something that can't just come and ask you straight away, you want them to know, then you want to focus on the usability a bit more, making sure that buttons are in the right place, they can know where they're going and all the rest of that. And then if you're making it for an external group, you're just focusing on the usability above everything. You've already kind of solved the mechanic, and you're making sure they understand how to use your product. And this is more of a UX research kind of thing, but knowing when to show the stuff that you've made is super important, because people are going to get clouded by the first time they play. The first time they play your prototype, the impression that they got is going to be persistent through the rest of the times that you show them. So the first time you show them, they're going to be super engaged, and then every time you show them the same kind of thing with minor tweaks, they're going to be like, oh, I don't know, this is kind of whatever. They won't really notice the differences as much. So you want to show to a rotating subset of people. So don't show the same people, and if you can, show a smaller subset. Only show if you have a question that needs answering, or if you're testing usability, and have a consistent set of questions. So then you can track the delta over time. So to summarize that, think ahead, be flexible, form good habits while planning, think holistically about your place in the project lifecycle, think about your target audience and have empathy, and just think about when to show. So what should you make? The most important thing about game development is having this thing called a strong vision. So that's a clear, consistent, and objective understanding of what you're making. This is called the vision. And someone on your team often is the vision holder. So they'll be the person who has the whole of this idea in their head, and you basically ask them, oh, does this idea fit in your vision? And they'll be like, yeah or no. And so they're the ones with the consistent vision, and they need to be communicating that to the rest of the team. So I've come up with a few different ways to find and maintain that vision over the course of the project, which is probably the hardest thing you'll find in the industry. So the first one is called the promise. So with this, the idea is, and like I alluded to earlier, of saying things in one sentence, is you describe the vision of your game, and I'll show you some examples of this in a second, in a single statement, like a statement of intent, if you will. And then when you add a new feature, or you're thinking about adding a new feature, you ask yourself, does this new feature that I'm adding fit with this this statement that I've said? And if it does, then great, you've got no problem, you can carry on going and implementing it. But if it doesn't, then it means one of two things. It could either mean that the feature doesn't fit in your vision that you've decided, or it means that the vision has to change in order to encapsulate this new feature that you're writing. At that point, you've then got to kind of stop and go, oh crap, I've got to go now looking back at all of the other features that I've added since and go, okay, does this still fit? Does this still fit? Does this still fit? And obviously the later that you leave this, the harder it is to change. So it's important to be able to catch this every feature so that you're not like drifting off and into a different kind of game that you don't want to be making. And then you just repeat that ad nauseum. So some examples of this just from last year of the games I've been working on. So one of the promises were a strategic mobile game where I play a commander of an elite squad, outsmarting real opponents to win in quick FPS-themed scenarios. That sounds awesome. And if I'm going to add a new feature to that, and I was like, oh, maybe you can recruit these guys off the street and add them to my squad, that'll be badass. But then I'm thinking, hang on, they've got to be elite squads. Maybe that doesn't quite fit there. Maybe I should not do that feature and instead put them into a training camp or something. Or maybe I should go, oh, maybe I need to change this to not be elite squads, or it's like a ragtag group of soldiers or something. So having a defined kind of statement of intent helps you kind of keep yourself honest. And the other one was a racing-themed game which gives me the fun, competition, control, and longevity I get from playing Mario Kart. Now this one's a bit of a weird one because it's got a reference to a real game in there, and so it comes with a lot of baggage as to everyone's interpretation of that game, so it could get a bit weird with semantics in there. But it also carries, it's like almost like a picture carries 1,000 words. A reference to another game is 1,000 words, and you've only got 17, so it's a good way of getting more words in there. So that's the promise. The next one, and you'll probably hear this a lot, is pillars or ideation gates. And these ones are, rather than one statement, you have like 5 pillars, which are like single words or 2 words. And these are to keep you honest in your vision. So this is the similar as the promise, but with multiple of them. This is really important, rather than for maintaining the vision, it's more important for filtering out what not to make while you're making gameplay features. So if you have a set of pillars, and I'll show you some in a second, and you start kind of brainstorming gameplay ideas, and you're there with your buddy and going, we could make this game, or we could make this game, or we could make this game. You could go through these pillars that you've made and rate each of your ideas out of 5 across all of these pillars, and then figure out if they're low rated in some of them or all of them, then it's probably not going to be part of your vision. If they're high rated, then they're probably good. So it's a good way of filtering out some of the ideas before you get too far in and have to start making them. So for a strategy game I was making recently, our pillars were mobile first, which is like, works really well on mobile. It's not like a console clone. It's like figures, it's nice interactive controls. Evergreen gameplay, can you still be playing this after day 365? Scalable, how hard is it to make content for this game with a team of 5 people? Is it going to need a content treadmill that's going to be like 100 people and outsources in China and all the rest of that? Player-driven content. Can we get the players to generate content for us either by battling each other, by chat, by social interactions, by alliances, all of that stuff? An opportunity for mastery. So is there that low skill floor that you need for mobile, but the high skill ceiling that people feel like, oh yeah, I'm really getting better at this thing? So those are our pillars. And every time we came up with a new kind of gameplay tweak on them, we'd kind of like rate them through these pillars just to make sure we were being savvy. The next bit is quite interesting, and it's kind of an interesting one because you'll be making your game, and then suddenly you'll realize you'll be a little like gray box and like rubbish art assets, and you'll be thinking, oh god, this game's too simple, I'm going to add some more mechanics to make it more complex. And then later on, some artist comes along and gives you the world's most beautiful art, and you're like, oh yeah, this is great. And then suddenly everyone's like, oh man, this game's way too complex. I don't know what I'm doing anymore, and it's really crazy. And the idea is that complexity isn't just one amorphous blob. It's actually lots of little blobs that need to be balanced with each other. So I've figured that the complexity can be divided into kind of 3 different sections. One of these is visual complexity. So you've got visual noise, camera shakes, kind of moving the camera around, panning, reduced clarity and chaos, and all this kind of stuff. Then you've got cognitive complexity, which is kind of like the strategy, the abilities that you can use and how they're going to affect each other, like the fact that there's units different places on the map, and the fact that you've got to be aware that this one is now blue and this one's orange. Like it's a lot to take in. And then the last one is interaction complexity. So how hard is it to tap the screen? Is it going to be a really accuracy-based things, or is it how often do you need to be tapping? How intuitive are the menus and all the rest of that? So these are the different sections that complexity could lie in during your game. And the idea is that neither of these 3 complexities is too high or too low. And if they are high, you're offsetting this low in other categories to make up for it. So the idea, I thought, again, I like rating things out of 5, and if you take these 3 and rate each of them out of 5, I kind of figured that, and in graph form here, if you add them all together, number 7's about right for mobile, probably 9 for console, because they can get away with being a bit more complex. If it's less than that number, then you're probably too shallow and people will get bored. And if you're more than 7, then it means you're probably too complex and people will be like, oh God, I don't know what to do. So it's important to keep these things balanced. So in summary for that section, try and find your own methods to keep that vision, because it's important to have it consistent throughout. Think about how to describe it. Complexity is important, keep an eye on it, and think about the opportunity trying to go after. So once you leave this lecture and you're like, oh God, I really want to get into the games industry, what should I learn about and how do I prepare myself for interviews and all the rest of that stuff? The number one I think if you want to get into kind of role that I want to get in, I'm in, is user experience. So learn everything you can about like why buttons are placed in certain ways, what makes your players tick, why they think the things that they think. These 3 kind of pillars that I've put together here are kind of things that I kind of stick by. So one of them is it's easy to understand. If you can't explain the thing in a sentence, then it probably doesn't belong in your game, or at least it doesn't belong user-facing. So you should hide it or break it up into smaller things that you can show. It does what it's expected. You want to guide the player, not like be telling them everywhere. They want to be like going, oh, I know where this is, because it makes obvious sense that it should be there. And one way to do that is to look at the way other games or really popular games do that thing, and then kind of make subtle tweaks on that, but you can keep it with what they do, because they'll be used to that kind of interactions. It's kind of become part of the tapestry of the UX. And lastly, good feedback on actions. So if the user does a thing, do a thing, and then tell them how great it is that they just did a thing. And that goes for every game, mobile or not. Like they tap the screen, go, and then they did a thing, it's great. And then you're like, congratulations. Like it's really important. And if you tap a button that you can't tap because it's disabled, make it shake about and say, you can't do that. People get a real kick out of having that immediate visceral interaction with everything that they do. 3D maths, super dry. Really learn this stuff by heart, because it's on every single interview and it catches me out every time I go into the interview and I'm like, oh, what's a vector? No, I don't do that. But like, if you get to the point where you go to an interview, just learn vectors, learn the dot product. Think of it, how similar are these 2 vectors? If you cross product, do this with your hand. If you got this vector and you got this vector, you get this vector. And quaternions, learn how to rotate things using 3D maths, and same with matrices. Honestly, people will ask you pros and cons for quaternions. They'll ask you what's the difference between a dot product and a cross product. They'll ask you maybe not so much about matrices, depends. But this is important. Design patterns, they'll probably ask you a little bit about this kind of stuff, but this is just really good stuff for you guys to internalize. Like if you guys can go and read up about the event bus and signals, if you can read about the ECS and maybe try out Entitas, it's a really cool framework for Unity for making data-oriented design. You probably learned a lot about model view separation already. If not, go research that. It's important. And then DI frameworks for injecting your dependencies into your code. It's probably advanced, but go ahead and learn it. It's a great way to impress your interviewers. They'll be like, wow, you know about DI? That's amazing, great job. An even more dry subject, data structures. Learn all of the pros and cons of each of the data structures. There's only like 7 or 10 of them, so just learn them, research them, write your own, well, not write your own original ones, but write your own versions of existing containers, because it's a great way of getting to know them, to get the ins and outs of them, and you're always going to be asked to write a linked list. I'm sorry, it's just, you'll go to an interview and they'll bring up a whiteboard and you're like, write me a linked list on this whiteboard, and then you'll have to go and do it, and it's hell, but you'll just get used to it. You could also look at unit testing if you want to be super smart. I'm not, so I don't. Yeah, that's that. Also, be experienced. Everyone's going to say like, oh, you need this amount of experience in the industry, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, but how can I get experience without actually working in the industry? That's unfair. It's a chicken and egg situation. Nowadays, it's so easy to make games. You've got Unity and you've got Unreal. You can just go out of this lecture now, download Unity, make a game and put it in the App Store by tonight. Like it's super quick. There's no problem at all. So go do that. You've got tons of time as students, maybe, I don't know, do you? Yeah, if you want to get into mobile, learn Unity and C#. That kind of it's the thing there. And if you want to go into console, learn Unreal and C++. They don't all use Unreal, but it's a great basis to get to get people going. You don't even have to make a whole game. Like if you really like Call of Duty and you like the auto-aim feature, just make the auto-aim feature, put it on a portfolio, and then when you go for an interview, go like, I made this auto-aim feature and it's super cool, and it tracks the dudes, and you shoot them and it kills them, great, I'm awesome. And they'll be like, oh yeah, clap. Or if you want to make a fluid dynamic simulation, which is what I did, everyone's super excited by that. So also, don't get jaded. I'm in the industry and I've been there for a while, and it sometimes creeps in. Be excited about the industry. Be excited about the things that you're going to be making. Inspire others. Inspire yourself. Just feel really excited to be in the industry. That's my biggest piece of advice for the night. Anyway, to summarize the whole kind of thing, it's value your end user. You're not making this for you, or maybe you are, but if you are, value yourself. 3D maths, it's dry and it's awful, and even I failed A-level maths, but eventually you pick it up and it's great and it's worth doing. Learn common design patterns. They're super important, and everyone thinks you're super smart when you know them. Data structures, just learn them and get experience and be inspired and inspiring. Anyway, I think that's me. Thank you. So I think we've got some questions.
Yes, we now have some time for questions. So if you have a question, just throw your hand up. Or maybe think of your questions now. We'll take a few from Twitch, and then we'll come to you guys, because that way I can sit here and do it and then move. So we have a question from Scottish Kona on Twitch, and they're asking, what's the best thing I should study to get into game developing?
So it's an interesting one, because in the industry, people don't look for specific degrees as much. There's maths degrees, which are always a plus. There's computer science degrees, which are always a plus. I did a games programming course, it worked, obviously. Games design courses are pretty good. I'm sure you could get in with an English literature degree if you were really inspiring in your interviews. Like, I don't think people are super caught up on it, because I guess an extra piece of advice is don't just do the stuff that they tell you in the lectures. Go home, be inspired, go online, make your stuff, show people, get involved in forums. Like, the biggest thing that interviewers are looking for is not what course you went to or what grade you did, but the fact that you did loads of cool stuff in your own time. You made this game, you put it on the App Store. We recently hired someone who had made a game, put it on the App Store, got 2 million installs, and was like super proud of it. Like, be that guy. Be inspired by it. Yeah.
Cool. Another one comes from Contra Maestra Curicito. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. And they're asking, what can I do as a developer when documentation is out of date?
That's an interesting one. Well, it depends. If it's open source, then I guess you tell the guys that open source. But what we've just started doing actually is this. We've got this system for generating documentation on all of your shared code, and then it runs a job which will then generate all of the documentation for all of the shared code projects and put it on a nice little repository so you can read through all of the documentation. And because it generates it from the code, it's super up to date and everything like that. So I guess that's what I'd advise. But the best skill you can learn as a developer is just to get stuck in, look at the code and understand what it does. If you need the comments to read the code was probably bad to start with. I write no comments because I'm an awful person.
Then there's another question from Datsheet Cray. They're asking, are data scientist roles prevalent in the gaming industry?
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge demand for data science, especially now with the advent of big data. So I know that Supercell's recently been really trying to hire data engineers and data scientists. So, and we have too. So that's like a really desired avenue. I think we've got a couple of speakers coming up over the month who are going to be really good at answering those kind of questions. So I'll kind of defer the in-depth stuff to them.
There's another question from Alex Banana. What should I study if I want to get into esports? Currently, there isn't anything.
That's a really good question. And I think rather than studying, maybe actually studying marketing and publicizing and all the rest of that stuff, and then get your YouTube channel going early is what I'd advise. But I think you're the best person to answer that question.
I will say that, yeah, for esports, there are some curriculums actually coming out. Like Staffordshire University, for example, is currently working on a curriculum for esports. But I do think it is, like Tom said, especially in the UK, the more practical experience that you can get, the better. Whether it's, you know, like helping out on a weekend, just streaming and running your own tournaments as well. Like if you're at a university club, then you know, set up a league at your school, start making productions in-house in your school. All those skills are super valuable. So I would definitely do that. If you're in the States, you guys have it down already. I mean, there are so many universities. I think NACE is hosting us as well. There are so many universities out there who will actually give scholarships and stuff for esports. So you're slightly ahead of us over there in the States, but the UK is starting to come up for sure.
Cool.
Shall we go to the audience? You want to stick your hand up, and then I'll come on over.
Oh.
As I trip and fall, glad nobody saw that. Can you just tell us your name and then your question?
Hello, I'm Robert. I'm trying to look for an industrial placement at the moment. I'm not sure if you have any tips for doing that, you know, where to look, sort of things to know that could help me.
So in the games industry?
Yeah, it would be games industry. Yeah.
So I also had a sandwich year where I went and worked in industry. There's quite a few government funded studios that get funding for hiring grads and people and interns, and they offer like a bursary scheme. It might be worth, this was 10 years ago, so I'm not too sure if it's still relevant, but I'm sure that funding, if anything, will have got greater. So it's probably worth searching around for companies that are getting supported by the government who are getting students in to help them, because that's definitely the way that would be good. There's also plenty of studios that do internships, mostly in console, because they have much more ways of getting multiple people, because it's such a large team. You can get people in there and train them with mentors. In mobile, because it's such small teams, it's harder to integrate them. It's also worth looking at the bigger companies, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, all the rest of those ones, because they offer really good intern programs as well.
And another question over here from...
Hey, I'm Luke. At Space Ape, how many creative engineers do you have, and how sought after is that kind of role?
So I think we've got maybe we've got 13 client devs, and of those, it's probably about a 50-50 split on whether they are like creative focused, as in they're on the new projects and they're working on that kind of stuff, and then the others are more core systems. They really enjoy making the nitty-gritty of things. And so but it's a super sought after role now. It's because it's getting like the aspects of design and engineering in one person. It kind of reduces the friction between someone having to say the idea and then someone else having to internalize the idea and then figure it out and then make it and going backwards and forwards. So it's also a bridge between design and code, so it's a super important role. It's very sought after. We've been trying to hire more for the last year, and it's very tricky.
And we have another question coming over here from...
Hi, my name is Mendin. I'd like to know how you are integrating version control with Unity, because as a team, I mean, because all the components are, well, it's really hard to deal with. I have no idea how to do that.
So one thing that I noticed right at the beginning is that there's a thing in the editor settings where you can set things to be forced as text rather than being binary. And that makes the merging a lot easier. We use Git for all our source control, and generally scenes don't merge together at all very well, but prefabs generally do. So what we do is we make sure that no one's really working on the same scene, and we use prefabs as much as we can because they merge really nicer. We also have a really big CMS, so content management system, outside of Unity. It's using protobuf that takes it outside of the serialized stuff from Unity. So we're generally merging that kind of stuff as, instead, and that's much easier to merge because it ends up being JSON. But yeah, we have the odd problem where an artist will check something in and then another artist will get latest and merge, conflicts happen, and then you're like, oh no, we've ruined the game, what do we do? And then someone has to come over and spend half their life fixing it. So it is definitely something that is not fun, and I feel like you need a PhD in order to use Git anyway. So yeah, I much prefer Perforce, but I probably can't say that.
Do we have any more questions from this audience? Otherwise, I'll grab some more from Twitch.
Cool. Have a think about it, guys.
Thanks. So we have got a question from Reverund. Is there a strong correlation between higher level math proficiency and proficiency as a games developer, or is it just a plus?
I think it's a plus, but it depends on what role you go for. If you're going to be like a really nitty-gritty core engine engineer or like a rendering engineer like Michael, you really need to know your maths because it's all 3D maths and it's super low level and crazy stuff. If you're going to be a gameplay engineer like me, you can get away with just knowing 3D maths and a little bit of big O notation and figuring out that kind of stuff. Like, don't sweat it if you're not like a super proficient mathematician. Like I said, I failed AS level maths or A level maths, and I'm doing just fine. In fact, the thing that kind of flipped me around was at university, one of the lecturers showed me how to use the dot product, and he showed me how to make a radar system using it, and I was just like, that's amazing, oh my god, I'm going to use this in everything I do. And then I was so inspired that then I went and learned everything I could about vectors and quaternions and dot product and cross product, and that served me good enough. Like, there's obviously being able to read all of the complex maths notations on Wikipedia is a plus, but it's not the end of the world because you can always go to simple.wikipedia.com and then read it, the dumb version.
Got another question from Delta, Ohio. They're asking, what do you think the next big thing in games will be?
I kind of think it's going to be AR. Like, everyone thinks the VR is the next big thing, or some people think that. I think the next transcendental shift in the industry is going to be AR, because VR is a very limited subset just for people who want to go into another world, and it's very like siloed. You all can't see anyone else, and it's just that. But AR is going to branch across not just games, but against the entire industry. It's going to be like a mobile phone. You don't just use it to play games. You use it to make phone calls. You use it to communicate and see your friends and all the rest of that. AR is going to open up a whole new demographic of developers who make up a whole new things, especially when it gets form factored down and HoloLens becomes less of a thing, less of a big thing. When it's contact lenses are in the future, and that's super exciting. I can't wait. I mean, I think we're all going to be looking over to each other's shoulders, kind of saying, "Oh yes, you're Barry, and you like computer science," or something like that. But it's going to be the best. It's going to be great. So I think AR is going to be the big thing. Yeah.
Another question from Rick Owens Athene. How difficult is it to develop an indie game as a solo dev, and can it be a viable career?
I think definitely it can, but you've got to make sure you can support yourself in the time that it does that. Like if you're living at home or you're living at uni, I mean, uni is the best time to do it. So if you guys are wanting to make a game, do it now, because as soon as you get out, you'll have horrible things in your contract that stop you making games. And I don't think Space Ape's got that, but if you sometimes have that. And then, yeah, just make sure you make it now while you can, while you've got all this time on your hands and you can do it. And it's really easy to do now. You just get Unity and you follow the tutorials. You make some Unity, you make some like components and little toolkits to keep you going, and then you share your code within each other. And as a solo dev, you can have something out in a couple of months. And even if it doesn't like make you tons of money straight off, it's fine, because you're just like that layer cake. You're just kind of layering it up there, the profits. So if you put something out and you make it, oh, you have to pay 69p for this, and 7 people download it. Great, you've just made an amount of money that I can't figure out. But if you then make another one, and then another one, and then another one, then you start getting 3 times that amount that I still can't figure out, and you're getting, building up that layer cake. And that's what we did at Space Ape to start off with. Each game was making slightly more money, slightly more money, slightly more money, and then we've got enough to keep us going and keep it going like that. So that's the approach that you should take as a solo dev as well. What I would suggest is either buddy up to an artist friend, or splash some cash on the Unity Asset Store, or steal some art from Google, and then when you've convinced an artist that your game is good, then have them replace it. Okay. Yeah. I'm sure it's definitely a viable thing. Just look at the guy who made Flappy Birds. That was like, I don't know, a weekend or something, and then he's making $50,000 a day. That could be you.
Cool. I know we have a question in the audience, which I'm probably going to go to last. And we still have a couple more on Twitch, just so I don't have to keep running back and forth to the audience. My wife left me 22, sad times, is asking, what types of internships should I be looking for when trying to get into the video game industry? Or video game design industry, sorry.
Into design. So next week we've got Adam Kay, who's one of the senior game designers at Space Ape. So he'll be really well placed to answer that. But I think for game design, it's been generally the case where if you want to get into design in the game industry, you either have to be really good or shake your screen. Slide graveyard, spooky, or you have to go in through QA. That's been generally my experience, is that you go in through QA, you learn a lot of stuff from testing the games, you pick up a lot of stuff, and then you move on up into game design, or into engineering, or into live ops, or project management, or anything like that. So I think the easiest path into the industry is through QA. The harder path is to do a games degree course and then a games design course and then try and get in straight in off the door. But it happens. Like, you can go in through one of the bigger companies, you can go in as an intern there, and there's definitely instances where that happens, for sure.
Cool. There's also a question from Adrian Jin. Do you have any advice for people who are trying to get into the business side of the gaming industry?
Interesting. I think studying business and marketing, like I said, for the esports one, is probably a good way to go. I don't know, you're probably better placed for this as well, but I don't know if you've got anything on that.
Sure, the business side of the gaming industry. Yeah, if you mean something like, marketing, biz dev, social media, that type of thing, definitely digital marketing. I mean, if you are really well versed in like new media, content, that kind of thing is really, really useful in the industry nowadays. And I mean, if you're into business, having an MBA or something is never going to hurt, because those are transferable skills, whether you're in the games industry or any other industry as well. So
I think law as well. A few of our
yeah,
CEO XOs have gone in through law. Yeah.
definitely. And I mean, even gaming, there's a lot around intellectual property law and that kind of thing too. So,
or even through just being a game developer. Like if you are that guy who wants to make your own solo game studio and do it, well, that's the easiest way to become into business management of the studio, is managing your business as you make games. You know, like just do it.
okay, so we're going to take one more from Twitch, and then we're going to go back to the audience, and then we're going to wrap. And this is from oh my gosh, Holly Alex Amox. Do you think there's space for 2D animations and artists in the games industry? Is 2D up and coming or going out of fashion?
I think it comes in waves. I think indie still is like loves 2D, and it's 2D is the thing. I think even in AAA, there's a few 2D games that are out there. On mobile, it's like the thing. Like sometimes 3D games come off a little bit cheap, and you get really nicely animated 2D games are like, oh wow, this is amazing. So there's definitely a place. I mean, we have tons of 2D artists at Space Ape, and they're like brilliant. So there's definitely room for 2D, especially UI UX as well, which is different, but there is a huge demand for UI UX in mobile. As in the West, UI UX is becoming the most important skill to have.
Cool. All right, I'm going to make it back over to who's here. Oh, okay, I'm going to start over here because it's slightly easier, and then maybe you can just hand down the mic to at the end there, yeah?
All right, so if you're a programmer and you can't get an internship in the games industry, and you have, for example, a summer of nothing, would you say it's a better use of your time to get traditional developer internship, or to actually make games during that time on your own and self-study?
So I did an internship for a few months and then went straight back into, I left that and went just into making games in my own time. And I think I found that just as useful, if not more, in that the experience that you can get on your own outside of university is really valuable. If you can turn up to the interview and show that you have done all of these things outside of university on your own time, people are going to be blown away. If you can release something onto the App Store, even if it's just like something small, people are going to be really impressed. So it's really, because it's quite difficult to get to the point where you're like fixing some of the bugs on the iOS side and making sure that it works on both iOS and Android and all the rest of that. So getting experience and all of that, putting it on your CV and saying, hey, I went out there, I released my own thing, I got this many people playing it, I made, maybe not how much money or whatever, but just like, I know the flow from full prototyping all the way through to release, through to making it, through to putting it on the App Store. I got some messages through on the chat, and then I fixed a bug and I sent it back. All of this shows that you're willing to do the full process. Whereas if you got an internship, maybe they'll just put you on the thing doing just some animation programming or something. And maybe that's not what you want to do for your career. So you'll touch more things doing it on your own. Having said that, if you do get an internship in a really prestigious place, that is also good, because that'll show up on your CV as well. So I think it's how you sell yourself. And we as Brits often sell ourselves really short on our CVs because we don't want to sound arrogant. Try doing that less. If we get into the industry, sell yourself. Say like, I spent this summer doing this thing. I'm really proud of this. Here's a link to the web build. Play it. See for yourself how cool it is. Yeah.
So, okay, I think we've got time for one more really, really quick question and answer, but Tom will be around afterwards for questions, so don't feel like you have to get them in now. We're going to stick around a little afterwards anyways, so if you guys have questions, feel free to throw them out. If you could just pass this down to the gentleman at the end.
Hiya. Yeah, the main thing I really wanted to ask was just as someone who's like focusing more on UI and UX, what sort of like the main things you should really focus on that? Is it more in terms of aesthetics or more in terms of like functionality and that sort of stuff, or like does it actually work well in terms of UI and UX?
So I think the latter is probably the thing I'd be focusing on the most. we do have UI artists who make things look pretty and maybe don't care so much about the functionality, and we have UX specialists who can combine, like, make the wireframes to make sure that people the right functionality, usability is there. Having said that, there are some like amazing UI UX artists who can do both, and if you are one of those people, that's super wanted in the industry. But if you're an engineer who can do the second part of what you said, the wireframing and having a good idea of how things work and what's good, then that's even more valuable to a certain extent, because you can make the systems, and not only that, you can make the systems feel good to the end user. And that's like when you're making a prototype or a game jam or something, people are going to play it and go, wow, this is really polished. But what they mean by that is it's really easy to use, and it's UX friendly and all the rest of the thing. That I think people get kind of brought in more when they don't have to butt up against not being able to figure out the game, so they get more engaged into it. So just focusing on that, even if you don't want to get into creative engineering, if you just want to be a systems engineer, still having a good idea. Because if you make tools, for example, if you want to be a tools engineer, UX is a huge part of that, because you want your designers or whoever's using your tools to go, oh, this is easy to use, or else if they're going like, oh God, I've got to remember to hold Alt, Shift, and 7 to enter text, then that's just like, that's CSI, that's silly.
Cool. Thanks so much, Tom. Thanks so much to all of you guys. You were just asking about UI UX. We actually have a talk on UI UX right here at Greenwich in 2 weeks' time with our lead UI and UX designers from Space Ape. So make sure you stay tuned to that. I think the schedule is up now. So tomorrow we've got Andrew Munden at UCL. He's going to be talking about competitive design. And make sure that you register for all of the upcoming classes as well, or watch online. Obviously, if you're here in person, then you might get yourself a t-shirt, and you can stick around and actually talk to the developers themselves if you're here in person. So that's cool. If you guys want more information, make sure that you pop us an email at varsity@spaceapegames.com. Follow us on Twitter @SpaceApeGames. We're going to put all of our updates on there regularly, so you guys will have a chance to come along and follow. Maybe give Tom a nice round of applause. Thanks so much, Tom. Cool. And that's it for us. We hope to see you guys tomorrow. Bye.
Thank you.